When you think of Las Vegas now, you picture the polish, the price tags, the whole city run by massive, faceless corporations. But it wasn't always like this. Before the boardrooms and the resort fees, the mob ran Vegas as their own private kingdom, a desert oasis where gambling was suddenly on the level, fortunes were made in a heartbeat, and fear was the ultimate law. Nobody even thought about stepping out of line. It all goes back to 1931, when a single law completely remade the Nevada desert, becoming a beacon for syndicate cash, for ambitious dreamers like Bugsy Siegel, and for a special brand of ruthless efficiency that took Vegas from a dusty little stop on the map to a global legend. But was this era of organized crime truly the city's golden age? Or was it just the opening bet in a much riskier game? The answer to that question lies at a forgotten intersection of law, sheer desperation, and underworld ambition. Back in 1931, Nevada's lawmakers were rolling the dice. Their mining industry was in shambles, and the Great Depression was grinding the entire state to a halt. So they made a gamble of their own. They legalized casino gambling and quickie marriages. The logic behind it was brutally simple. If the state couldn't dig wealth out of the ground anymore, maybe it could lure it from the pockets of travelers, of dreamers, and of anyone out there just hungry for a second chance. That very same year, the massive Hoover Dam project brought thousands upon thousands of workers to the edge of that same desert. These men worked long, punishing hours, and when the sun went down, they poured into the nearby towns, looking for any way to spend their hard-earned paychecks. All of a sudden, saloons and makeshift clubs started popping up all along Highway 91. Places like the Paradise Club offered a game of blackjack, some cheap whiskey, and a silent promise that they wouldn't ask any questions. For outsiders with vision, and more importantly, cash, Nevada's new laws were like a giant neon invitation. The rules were practically non-existent. There was no real oversight, and the potential for profit was absolutely off the charts. The syndicates back east in Chicago, Cleveland, and New York saw the writing on the wall almost immediately. First, they sent out scouts, then they sent cash, and then they sent their most trusted men to set up shop. A man named Meyer Lansky, already a legend for his brilliant financial mind, started funneling a river of money out west. He wasn't the kind of guy to run the slot machines himself. No, he was building the entire network, backing the front men and making sure the right palms were greased so that business could flow without a single interruption. By the early 1940s, the Strip was beginning to take shape, but it wasn't a playground for the super rich. It was a place where anybody could walk right in, lay down a bet, and feel like a high roller, if only for one night. And the money? It flowed in every direction. Tourists would lose their shirts at the tables. Workers earned a steady wage building the next new club, and the mob's financiers took their tidy cut right off the top. The state's big gamble had paid off, big time. In just 10 years, Las Vegas had morphed from a sleepy railroad town into a city where fortunes changed hands with every single hour that passed. The local authorities? Well, they were just happy to see the tax money and jobs rolling in, so they mostly learned to look the other way. For the mob, it was the perfect storm, legal on paper but wide open for the kind of operation that runs on cash, on secrets, and on deals sealed with a simple handshake. This was the vacuum the mob filled, and they brought more than just money. They brought a code of conduct that ran on loyalty, on silence, and above all, on results. The groundwork had been laid for something far, far bigger. The city was ready for a vision and a risk that only syndicate money could afford. Then, in 1945, Benjamin Bugsy Siegel rolled into Las Vegas, and he brought with him a promise that sounded like something out of a fever dream. He spoke of a palace in the desert, a place where Hollywood stars would gamble under crystal chandeliers, and every guest who walked in would be treated like royalty. And he was backed by Meyer Lansky and a mountain of syndicate money from the East Coast. Siegel took charge of a half-built project known as the Flamingo. He poured money into it, first $1 million, then $2, then $4. By the time the doors finally swung open on Christmas night of 1946, the price tag had skyrocketed to $6 million, an absolutely staggering sum for that era. But the dream was already showing cracks. The desert skies opened up and rain poured down. Construction crews were still scrambling to finish the rooms, and the high-stakes gamblers Siegel had been counting on were nowhere to be found. For weeks, the Flamingo was bleeding cash. Soon, the whispers started. Rumors that Siegel was skimming from the top, or worse, that he was lying to his backers. The bosses back in New York and Chicago began asking some very uncomfortable questions. 6 months later, Bugsy Siegel was found dead in Beverly Hills. The official story was a robbery, robbery. But everybody in the know understood it was a business decision. And just like that, overnight, Mo Sedway and Gus Greenbaum, two trusted men from Lansky's own circle, took control of the Flamingo. The chaos immediately stopped. Within months, the casino was turning a healthy profit. Payroll records from that summer tell the story. Regular paychecks, strong union contracts, and a new kind of discipline on the casino floor. The dealers and the showgirls, they all remembered Sedway by name, and for the very first time, the Flamingo felt like a professionally run business, not a madhouse. The blueprint had been set in stone. Mob money would build the dream, and the local workers would keep it running. And the tourists just kept lining up, wallets wide open. Taking a little off the top became business as usual. But you know what? So did a steady paycheck and a feeling that things were under control. The Flamingo's comeback sent a clear message all the way down the strip. This town wasn't just for the brave anymore, it was for the guys who knew the right people. And as the money poured in, every new casino that popped up just copied the playbook. You had loans from the syndicate, muscle from the local unions, and just the right amount of sparkle to make everyone forget about the messy business that sometimes stained the marble floors. Look, in mob-run Vegas, discipline wasn't something you'd find in an employee manual, and it sure as hell wasn't enforced by a security camera. It was just understood. You could feel this presence hanging over every card table, in every back room. The dealers, the pit bosses, even the bartenders, they all got it. They knew the unwritten rules, and they knew exactly whose eyes were on them. I remember a retired pit boss laying it out for me once, real simple. He said they didn't need cameras because everybody knew who was watching. That unseen supervision dictated the entire rhythm of life on the casino floor. If you were a cheat or a thief, you didn't get a second chance. News traveled fast when someone stepped out of line. Sometimes you were just out of a job right then and there. And other times, well, they just weren't around anymore. That thread of a different kind of justice kept things peaceful in a way no police cruiser or metal detector ever could. But it wasn't all just fear. There was this strange sort of fairness to it all. If you were a casino worker, especially one holding a union card, you had a kind of job security you just couldn't find anywhere else in the country. Your paycheck was always on time. Unions, like the Culinary 226, fought for contracts that gave you actual health care, predictable hours, and a real shot at buying a home, all on a service industry salary. Even the cocktail waitresses and the showgirls, working those long nights for tips, they'll tell you a pit boss or a manager would step right in if a customer got handsy. For a lot of folks, the outfit felt less like a menace and more like an insurance policy. A tough one, sure, but they had your back, as long as you played by their rules. Now, let's be clear, this was no paradise. Piss off the wrong guy and your career could be over before the sun came up. And that loyalty, it usually only flowed in one direction. But for the people who just showed up, did their job, and kept their opinions to themselves, the system actually worked. The whole city operated on a simple code. You respect the house, and you respect the people working there. And whatever you do, you keep the cosmic off the casino floor. That code created this strange kind of trust, not just between the bosses and their crews, but between the city itself and the people who were proud to call it home. In a town literally built on taking chances, the mob gave people something that, believe it or not, felt a lot like safety. And Frank Sinatra, well, he didn't just sing in Las Vegas, he practically invented the place. On any given night back in the 1950s and 60s, you could wander into the Sands and see him up on stage, flanked by Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr., playing to a room packed with movie stars, high-stakes gamblers, and regular tourists all rubbing elbows. The Rat Pack made the Strip the coolest place on earth, and the city, it just rolled out the red carpet for absolutely everyone, not just the famous faces. You wanted to see the show? You didn't have to be a millionaire or know somebody who knew somebody. All you had to do was walk right through the front door. The casino lobbies were electric. You'd have bellhops greeting you by name, dealers sharing a laugh with the regulars, and hey, a cocktail waitress might just slide you an extra drink on the house if she liked the cut of your jib. This hospitality, it wasn't just an act, it was the city's signature. They kept the room rates cheap, the booze was practically free, and every single visitor got the royal treatment. It didn't matter if you were in a tuxedo or a Hawaiian shirt. The whole idea was simple: make every single person feel like a somebody, and they'll keep coming back for more. But the money to build this whole fantasy world, it didn't just materialize from nowhere. Behind the curtain, the Teamsters pension fund was funneling millions into new resorts. It sparked a construction boom that gave us legends like the Stardust, the Riviera, and the Dunes. Then the Tropicana opened its doors in 1957, costing a mind-blowing $15 million, which pretty much set a new bar for what luxury even meant back then. But these places, they weren't just casinos. They were full-blown playgrounds for for the American dream, built by union hands and always finished on time. The workers were making good money, and the city's middle class was growing right along with that neon skyline. And for most of the people visiting, all that glamour felt completely real. You could catch a huge star, have a great steak dinner, and play the slots all night without having to empty your bank account. And if one of the bosses took a shine to you, your drinks and maybe even your room were on the house. That was the real magic of mob-era Vegas. It had this incredible way of making regular folks feel like they were anything but. It was a town that promised you a thrill, a little generosity, and a real taste of the high life. And the best part? No questions asked. But every single casino on that strip shared a dirty little secret. The real money, the serious money, wasn't being made on the tables or in the slot machines. It was being quietly whisked away before it ever had a chance to be counted. They called it the skim, and it was a masterpiece of deception, running like clockwork. The whole thing kicked off in the early hours, with technicians quietly recalibrating the slot machines, ensuring the official numbers would never ever line up with what was actually being raked in. You see, it was just a few percentage points shaved off here, a couple more there. It doesn't sound like much, but it was enough to make millions of dollars disappear into thin air every single year, completely off the books. Take the Stardust, for example. It was the very heart of the operation. Inside the count room, a hand-picked crew of trusted staff would dip into the drop boxes, pulling out stacks of cash long before the official count even began. That surplus cash? It was a ghost. It never touched the official ledgers. Instead, it was bundled up, stuffed into plain envelopes or anonymous suitcases, and then passed to a courier whose only job requirement was to never ever ask questions. On paper, a company called Argent Corporation, with its perfectly clean paperwork, owned the casinos. But the real shot callers, the men who truly owned the town, were hundreds of miles away, just waiting for their next delivery to arrive. You'd see these couriers blending in with the tourists at McCarran Airport, flying out with stacks of undeclared cash, sometimes cleverly hidden in bags with false bottoms, on their way to places like Chicago, Kansas City, or Cleveland. And the journey didn't end there. That money would often change hands 3, maybe 4 times, a shadowy chain of command ensuring it finally reached its ultimate destination. The FBI tried to put a number on it, and in some years, they figured the skim from just a single casino, like the Stardust, could top a staggering $15 million. And every single cent of it was untaxed, undeclared, a fortune built in the shadows. And the craziest part? Nobody in the entire state seemed all that eager to notice. The whole system was built on a foundation of absolute unspoken trust, from the count room supervisors right down to the slot technicians. Even the cashiers had to play their part perfectly, because if just one person talked, if a single courier made a mistake, the entire fragile chain could come crashing down. And yet, for decades, this incredible operation ran almost without a single hitch. On the surface, the city was a glittering spectacle of light and sound, but underneath all that neon, the real currency of Las Vegas, cash, favors, and secrets, moved in absolute silence. It was all held together by a code of secrecy so tight that law enforcement just couldn't seem to break it. The prosperity that everyone saw on the strip, that was only half the story. Behind the curtain, it was the skim that decided who got rich, who stayed safe, and who simply vanished when the numbers didn't quite add up. But then came November of 1950, and suddenly, the Clark County Courthouse in Las Vegas was swarming with reporters. Casino bosses, federal agents, everyone was there. Senator Estes Kefauver's committee had rolled into town, and for the very first time, the city's dirtiest secrets were about to be broadcast live, directly into living rooms all across America. Can you imagine? Over 30 million people were glued to their television sets, watching these powerful casino owners and suspected mob figures squirm in their seats under a barrage of relentless questions. And these hearings, they did more than just name names. They put a face to all the whispers and rumors. Suddenly, local officials were being grilled on live TV about their connections to out-of-state money, and casino ledgers were being torn apart for the whole country to see. It was a spectacle that captivated the nation. For so many Americans, this was their first raw, unfiltered glimpse into the shadowy underworld that operated just behind the glittering facade of the neon signs. When the committee's final report came out, it was scathing. It slammed the city's ridiculously weak regulations and sent out a stark warning. Las Vegas was a playground, wide open for racketeering. Naturally, recommendations for tighter licensing and federal oversight came next. But more More importantly, the hearings forced state officials to finally admit what most locals had known all along. The mob wasn't just some story you whispered about, it was the house. And just like that, the era of quiet backroom corruption was over. The whole country was watching now. It was into this new, high-stakes environment that a man named Tony Spilotro arrived, bringing with him a reputation that had already reached Vegas long before he did. He'd been sent by the Chicago outfit with one job: protect their interests. But Spilotro quickly built his own crew and wasted absolutely no time making headlines. And not the good kind. His crew, who the press dubbed the Hole-in-the-Wall Gang, started hitting jewelry stores and pawn shops with a brutal lack of subtlety. Forget picking locks, these guys just smashed right through the walls. And the violence wasn't staying in the back alleys anymore. Suddenly, beatings, threats, and even worse started spilling out, getting closer and closer to the glitz of the Strip. Spilotro's way of doing things was loud. It was messy, and you simply couldn't look away. People started finding bodies out in the desert, and the once quiet casino floors were now buzzing with nervous whispers about who might be next. You have to understand, for decades, the mob's power in this town had been practically invisible. It was enforced by a quiet whisper, a knowing glance from the right person at the right time. But with Spilotro on the scene, that old code was shattered. The FBI saw their opening and started planting wiretaps all over town. The newspapers were having a field day, splashing every lurid detail of the robberies and disappearances across their front pages. Whatever sense of safety the city once had, it just evaporated. Then, in 1986, it all came to a head. Spilotro and his brother were found buried in an Indiana cornfield. It was a final, brutal message to everyone. The old days of a silent, orderly mob were officially over. And as one era ended, another was beginning. Howard Hughes descended on Las Vegas in 1966 and began a legendary buying spree. He wasn't interested in just renting the penthouse suite, he wanted to own the entire building. In the span of just 2 years, Hughes had snapped up the Desert Inn, the Sands, the Frontier, and the Landmark, spending an incredible sum of over $300 million to do it. And his deals were different. They were hammered out behind closed doors, not with mobsters and pit bosses, but with lawyers and bankers. For the very first time, the reins of casino ownership were being passed from the old streetwise bosses to a new breed of man, the corporate executive in the boardroom. You see, regulators were desperate for a more respectable image, so they welcomed Hughes and the wave of corporate money that came with him. By the late 1980s, the Strip was no longer just a mishmash of local outfits and syndicate fronts. The real giants, conglomerates like Mirage Resorts and Caesars, were taking over. They were putting up these colossal mega resorts on a scale the old guard could never have imagined. The Mirage opened in 1989 with a staggering $630 million price tag, followed by the Bellagio in 1998 at $1.6 billion. And with corporate ownership, a whole new culture arrived. Handshake deals and free perks were out. Resort fees, paid parking, and digital loyalty programs were in. The city that built its name on cheap thrills and a personal touch was now run by quarterly reports. The mob's Vegas was fading into a memory, replaced by a corporate logo and the bottom line. Back in 1950, Las Vegas was just a small town of 24,000 residents. By 1970, it had exploded to over 125,000, a boom driven by casino jobs and mob-financed investments. The truth of it is plain to see. The outfits built a city where you could get low-cost fun, solid union wages, and strict order, all existing right alongside the skim and a kind of violence that was kept in the shadows. FBI records tell one side of the story, confirming millions were skimmed off the top each year, while union archives show workers getting steady pay and real protection. Still, not every file from that period has seen the light of day, and some of the decisions behind the mob's unique brand of discipline remain off the books. After Howard Hughes started his casino buying spree in the late 1960s, the suits began to replace the bosses, and by the 1990s, room rates and hidden fees skyrocketed as that local run feeling just vanished. Las Vegas today is without a doubt safer, wealthier, and a lot more polished, but it's lost that personal connection that once defined it. The story of Mob Vegas is a paradox of ambition and contradiction, a place where a community managed to thrive even as crime flourished. It's a complicated legacy to be sure, but the facts are the facts. The mob built a city, and the corporations came in and changed its very soul.